Good Friday afternoon, everybody. I'm Mark Dyer, and welcome to my studio. Another exciting segment of Friday Live in the studio. What's that crazy guy up to today? So, hope you all are doing well. Today I want to kind of give you a little insight into my creative process and how I think and what goes on in my brain the majority of the time. So, I want to start out by kind of reading. I have an artist statement that I have posted. And kind of reading that. So I kind of tongue-in-cheek say the first part. How are you, Anthony? So I say art is my religion and solitude is my prayer. I'm a constant sinner and a devoted practitioner. So that kind of says it all. Like I said, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. But my real artist statement is I create abstracts from fragmented and shattered pieces of life and thoughts. I assemble them into mosaics, hoping that they are identifiable familiarities to the viewers to connect with and have their own experiences from their own vantage points. And I do this whether I'm sculpting or painting or writing. Excuse me. And so it's kind of a culmination of everything. But I like to use these real hard-edged primary, secondary, and tertiary shapes and forms, whether I'm painting again or in my sculptures. And the idea of exploring automatism, those subconscious feelings and thoughts and shapes and forms, with an intentional narrative like the nudes, the figurative nudes, imposed in that abstract form, almost in a fluid-like manner, or kind of a astrological kind of movement. And so those are all the ideas that go behind it. I like to dwell in the reality and kind of use metamorphoses, transcend things and dance with the idea of over-exaggeration and drawing you, the viewer, in and leading you around and kind of letting you experience the work through your own eyes. I strive to make that work kind of mature as you come back and view the painting or the work, the sculpture. So I always want to have that constant flow of new energy each and every time you see it. Thank you, sir. So, yeah, the idea of the viewer wanting to view my work more than once, and each time you come back, seeing something new and exciting and different, and so that's kind of the idea behind myself, that it kind of reveals itself over time rather than perhaps maybe all at once. So when I talk about creating from the fragmented and shattered pieces of thoughts and life, really that's kind of it's not as dramatic as it sounds. Really what I'm doing, as we're trying to say, is that I take the bits and pieces of my memory or bits and pieces of a conversation I've had or overheard or read or imagery that's come to mind or I've seen. So I take those little pieces and I kind of put them together, and so I kind of like to say it's kind of like breaking a plate, and you put the plate back together, and yeah, it's still a plate, but when I break a plate, and I tend to use those little pieces to make something else. And that's kind of the same thing with my thought pattern of creativity, is I take those little pieces and expound on it, and later on, as I talk, I'll kind of go back into that idea. So the idea of primary and secondary and tertiary colors, again, are those fragmented pieces. Primary is that initial thought, that primary feeling, but then I have all these secondary thoughts around what I'm doing. So in these paintings, I have my own kind of language that I talk about different things and say different things, and although it's not a verbal communication or English or Spanish or that a written communication, it's my own language of how I speak about these different emotions that I have. And so, the tertiary are all these little fragmented pieces that come together in that. And so with the automatism, the idea of subconsciously drawing things and then kind of managing that, so allowing myself to not only be subconscious about things, but to be conscious. So it's a conscious, subconscious kind of dance I'm doing all the time with those things. Because I always have this curiosity about what if I try this, what if I do that. And I'm constantly pushing myself every day to do something different, to do something more, to do something I haven't done. I've always been an artist from the time I can remember. I've always created things, built things, tried to make things. So being creative is kind of a mindset, and they kind of have scientifically proven that artists are different. Their brains are wired a little bit different, and so that's kind of where I'm at. It's a challenge to me, and I'm always taking these things kind of head on and really thinking about how I can create it differently. And part of that is looking for a different way through communication of life, communication of living. What is going to be my legacy that I leave behind? How can people interpret the idea of what times we've lived in now? And so all of those things go into my work. I spend a lot of time studying and contemplating my compositions and looking at my work and how can I tweak something that will maybe help you move through my work a little easier or a little differently, and convey those experiences that I'm hoping you will experience. So, excuse me, I'm kind of looking through my notes here. So, one of the things that I do, and it's really important to me, is, while I have all these creative experiences, it's really the craftsmanship behind what I do is really important to me. So all of those things kind of combined into my brain as I'm working of not only how can I be more creative, but how can I make this archival, how can I make this last a lifetimes, 100 lifetimes. So all of those things kind of go into the process of while I'm standing in front of a canvas or while I'm setting in front of a canvas. My house is positioned now so I can see from my spot on the sofa, if the dogs will let me, into the studio, and I can see what I'm working on. And so a lot of times I'll listen to the television or I'll have the music on, but I'm really looking at my work and contemplating my work. It consumes me. I'm obsessed with it. I'm possessed with it, and I've always kind of been that way. So I think differently about things. I experience the world differently. Like I said, it's kind of scientifically proven that artists really our brains fire a little bit different, and so what I would see going out in the world and you see going out in the world are probably different. My eyes translate patterns, my thought patterns, my thinking, rather than seeing, just a car. I see the light on the car. I see 100 million different things run through my mind as I take one glimpse at something. So the way a shadow cast on a building is fascinating to me. The way the grasses move just quickly in the wind or in the sunlight, those are all fascinating to me. But that's all that information that I'm constantly gathering, and eventually some of that finds its way back into my work, whether it's the colors that I'm using. A lot of people think that I use bright colors but all of these colors are really found in nature. They're all kind of, so it's all of these things kind of start getting into this melting pot of my brain, and this is how I start creating things. And so it's constantly evolving for me. I'm constantly pushing myself past what I did yesterday, always exploring. That's probably the biggest thing I love is exploring. I don't like to be locked in, even in my thinking, even in my daily interactions with people. I'm not a certain person. I know who I am, but nothing has to be certain. Nothing has to be absolute with anybody with me. I'm always adapting and adaptable, but part of that comes from having that idea of an open mind and always constantly searching for something new, a new direction, a new thought, a new way of looking at things. So it's really an important part of my creative process here in the studio and what I do. So I had gotten some feedback about the piece that I wrote the other night, and so it kind of put it into perspective how these things really work in my brain. I've always lived very rural. the majority of my adult life and even when I was younger. So I'm not used to the noises of the city, and 5 years ago I moved into town of 8,000 people. Man, it's huge here. But right behind me is a major 5-lane thoroughfare that is a major north and south corridor that goes to the bridge that crosses the Ohio River. So there's always a lot of traffic back here. There's a big hump in the road, and so as the semis go up and down here, they're always hitting that bump in the middle of the night, and cocoon, cocoon, if they have an empty trailer. So getting used to that noise has been difficult because I'm an insomniac. I sleep a few hours and I'm awake, and so those kind of noises wake me up. And unbeknownst to me, I've kind of become accustomed to it. So a few nights ago, I had taken my dogs out and noticed that the traffic was much lighter up and down the highway back there, and kind of puzzled me. And then the night that I wrote that piece, I had taken the dog out in the middle of the night. I had woken up and had insomnia and taken the dog out, and how are you, David? And had taken the dog out and was standing there and realized that there was absolutely no traffic, no semis, no cars, no trucks, no nothing. It was absolutely dead silent. And as I stood there for several minutes while the dog did its business, it just kind of, it struck me as odd. It was kind of eerie feeling. It struck me as odd that I had come accustomed to the noise and the traffic, and now that it was gone, and that deafening sound, it's this, you know, there's no sound, and that then becomes the deafening part of what we've become accustomed to. And so that kind of got me thinking about different things. About 9/11, I remember walking out of the house and not hearing airplanes in the sky, and that deafening silence. You know, you become so accustomed to those sounds, and so that's kind of where that then built on. So that was another piece of that mosaic for that particular writing, and then thinking about the AIDS crisis and the deafness and the deafening silence of our government and how it responded to all of my friends dying and all of your friends dying. So all of these things kind of go into this melting pot, and then they become something that I create. So I equate it to George Lucas. You know, he wrote Star Wars, but I'm sure he's never been into outer space. And so the idea is you expound on those things that you know, but you build on them. You're always building on them. And the same with my creativity. I take that one little piece of mosaic and then I build around it. And so something that's factual and then expounded on is how I create things here in the studio. So the idea of always having, I just lost my train of thought, the idea of always having to kind of build each mosaic differently is the idea of looking at things differently, creating things. So, excuse me, so it's the idea of really what I'm doing in my compositions is I'm providing you a roadmap to experience this work, to lead you around, to let you go in and out of what I've done, and to allow you to experience those things from your own viewpoint, not my viewpoint. I know what I've said, and I hope I conveyed that. But it's up to you then as the viewer to have your own experience. So it's I kind of equate it to the idea of we can both Google directions and Google Map our way to a national landmark, but our trips and our experiences of that landmark are going to be totally different. And those are all dependent on our own, the traffic might be heavier for you, it might be heavier for me, lighter, all those different things. It might be raining the day you went, it might be sunshine. So all of those things are different experiences, and it's the same when you view my work. It's up to you to view those things and to come back and revisit those pieces, and maybe the next time you come back you'll see something different that you didn't see before. And so a lot of times what I do is a lot of people will view something and they'll say, oh look, there's a positive shape, look at that positive shape, it's really cool. And the next time they come back they don't see that positive shape because now that positive shape has then faded into the background and it's become a negative shape to another shape that becomes a positive shape. So for me, that's all a language. That's my own personal language of how I convey things. So when I'm talking about the different aspects, especially in my writing and how my writing relates to my paintings, the idea of humanizing gay people, that's really kind of one of my efforts over the last couple of years. Is we've been so dehumanized and villainized and demonized that I'm trying to make people understand that we are connected to one another. I've been in love. We've all been in love. We have all had relationships. Short term, long term, it doesn't matter. We still have those emotional connections to those people, and that's really emotional desires, whether it's friendships that we have and how we relate to those things. But we are human. We are not to be dehumanized. And so my political statement is to humanize gay people by writing about love and about emotion, about connection. That is my creativity from that little mosaic of how to expound on those things and how to let people who maybe haven't experienced those things or don't think about those things. And I hate to generalize, but I'm going to generalize. A lot of straight people don't understand that gay people, whether it's lesbians or transgender or bi people, or gay men, we all have those emotional connections at one time or another. And so that's the idea, is to kind of put that up there and allow people to experience us in a different way than what they've seen on television, than what they've been told, than what, you know, the abominations that we've been labeled with. So that's part of what I do in my work, part of what I say. Also, I've always been fascinated with the human form, how it moves, how it bends in, how it ages. All of those things are just really fascinating to me, and that's kind of, like I said, it's that curious mind that I have as an artist, and so that's kind of, you know, those are always those things that are rolling in my head. It just never seems to quit some days, and I usually have a lot more ideas than I actually have time to execute. So that's kind of the view into the brain in the studio. So I spend a lot of time here by myself, and I'm perfectly content with that. It's kind of, I think, better for me in some aspects to have that time, because it allows me. I get distracted when the dogs, you know, want to go out 500 times a day or want food and all those things. But kind of that solitary life or a quiet life is really, I think, as an artist, what we need sometimes. We can't always create in a vacuum, and we do have to have those external exposures, but for the most part it's very much, I enjoy my solitude. I enjoy listening to music and just kind of getting lost in my own world here. So we're kind of in difficult times right now. I hope you all are taking good care of yourselves. Wash your hands, don't touch your face. Be kind to one another when you see each other, and we'll see you next week. Thank you all.